Subscribe to get the news the legacy media won't tell you and only the Daily Signal can bring to you.
During our days in the wilderness when we were in the minority, I'd written something like over 60 oversight letters to federal health agencies, Department of Defense, other people involved in what I referred to as our miserably failed response to COVID. The lack of transparency from the agencies, I think, has been jaw-dropping.
All right, we are very lucky to be joined today by Senator Ron Johnson. He is the chairman of the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. A senator from Wisconsin, he was first elected in 2010, and he will be leading the oversight agenda in the Senate. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
So just to start with, what's ahead for Senate oversight going through 2025?
Well, I've often said I'll be like a mosquito in a nudist colony. It's a target-rich environment. I'm going to focus, obviously, on oversight investigations into government actions. During our days in the wilderness when we were in the minority, I'd written something like over 60 oversight letters to federal health agencies, Department of Defense, other people involved in what I referred to as our miserably failed response to COVID. The lack of transparency from the agencies, I think, has been jaw-dropping. And so, we're going to focus on that. I've got a pent-up demand for information that belongs to the American public, that they have every right to see. Things like the analysis of the vaccine injury surveillance systems, the empirical Bayesian analysis that when we ask for the proportional reporting ratios, they say, oh, we stopped doing those, we do EB now. So, okay, well, send us those. And they haven't. They've released some limited information through FOIA requests, but so you've had citizens gain access through the courts before members of Congress who have constitutional authority to demand this information. We haven't even gotten it. I mean, things like the last 50 pages of Anthony Fauci's emails that were heavily redacted. That we received about 4,000 pages. We narrowed our request to 400 unredacted. They wouldn't give them to us. They've allowed us into a reading room for the first 350. That took about a year's worth of effort. And now we're down to the last 50 pages after about 3 years. The redacted emails were incriminating enough. Who knows what's in those last 50 pages? So that'll be an early target of subpoenas.
With a new administration, do you think those messages and documents will be unredacted?
Absolutely. We will get those unredacted. Will we get all the information we requested? I don't know. My assumption is the shredders, the bleach bit programs and stuff are in high gear or were in high gear. Still might be. I suggested early on after President Trump's election that he ought to appoint somebody called a Secretary of Information Extraction. The deep state does not give up its secrets easily, no matter who's in charge.
All right. Well, we did see President Joe Biden on his way out of office issued a marathon of pardons. You mentioned Dr. Anthony Fauci, obviously his family members and so forth, but and others. But one catch to that is that once you're pardoned, you can't plead the fifth. Do you plan on subpoenaing any of those individuals to get testimony since they no longer can invoke the fifth?
Yeah, that is a double-edged sword to the pardons. I mean, it does imply some measure of potential guilt. Otherwise, why would you do it? But no, first we have to get the documents. I mean, what you don't want to do is just call somebody in for an interview before they have the documentation to base your questions on. You don't want to call people in for a hearing until you've probably done a transcribed interview. So there's a process to doing this. We'll have to be, somewhat patient. But again, I'm assuming the next administration will be far more transparent, far more open to providing Congress the information that, again, the American people demand.
Okay. All right. And so one aspect of the last presidency, do you think there is a space to investigate at the congressional level who was in charge during the Biden administration and what they covered up in terms of how aware he was of what was going on?
That might be a difficult one. Mm-hmm. I think we all kind of assumed that he wasn't all there, that you had members of a group of, I would call, radical leftists that have really been running government through the Obama administration, then the Biden administration. They just, they had a 4-year pause and they took right back over. We've witnessed what President Obama meant when he said the fundamental transformation of America. It's the fundamental destruction of it. And we were saved by the bell. We've got a 4-year reprieve of that destruction. We better keep winning elections. In terms of what kind of oversight, that's going to be a more difficult one. I don't know what documentation would exist, exactly how do you go about doing it. Does it really matter at this point? I mean, we saw the destruction of their governance. President Biden and or his successor did not win. Donald Trump won. So, Donald Trump was right. He said his retribution will be in the form of success. Right. I agree with that by and large, but there are things that absolutely do need to be, loose ends need to be tied up, questions that need to be answered if we're going to move forward and reform these agencies. So, again, asking that question, I'm not sure how that's going to really help us moving forward. The American public spoke that they were very dissatisfied with Democrat governance.
Okay. All right. Now, you were among the first people in Congress to raise questions about the government's official narrative about COVID, vaccines, everything else. Also, the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, Senator Paul, has raised a lot of the same questions. Do you think you, as subcommittee chairman, and him as chairman, will be working pretty close together on that?
Yeah, we absolutely will. I think Rand, is really interested in the gain of function research. He's done a good job as ranking member and on the HELP committee as well. He's a doctor. I don't like duplication of efforts, so I'll let him focus on that. I certainly am interested in exactly what people like Anthony Fauci, Deborah Birx, other people that I think sabotaged the last administration, did not provide the American public the informed consent they needed on the injections. I'll focus more on our miserably failed response. The sabotage of early treatment, the FDA's issuance of their tweet on ivermectin, which was completely inappropriate. This isn't horse paste. There is a version that is horse paste, but ivermectin is a Nobel Prize-winning drug. Has saved millions of people from river blindness. Unbelievably safe drug. No drug's 100% safe, but this is one very safe drug, and yet the FDA was advising against it, doing everything they could to sabotage the use of it. That could have saved literally hundreds of thousands of lives. So that needs to be investigated, and that'll probably be more my focus.
Okay. You did write a letter during the last administration to HHS, FDA, CDC, asking that they preserve the documents. Do you know whether they did, or have they provided anything? Given that
no, again, they were very opaque. Okay. They've not been cooperative. We've gotten very little information from the previous administration. I'm looking for far greater transparency out of the Trump administration. Do I believe we'll get every document? Do I believe every document was preserved? I doubt it. But they need to be very careful. For example, as my staff uncovered the email that Dr. Morin's, where he revealed that he has somebody inside FOIA advised them how to avoid providing information to Congress and to the public under FOIA requests. Again, just a corrupt act that is. But we got that because, not from the federal government, we got that because that email went to other entities. And we requested similar information from other entities that were dealing with the federal government on some of these issues, and that's where we uncovered that email out of about 115,000 pages of documents. So these investigations aren't easy. They're going to cover up what they can cover up. But it is, even if they destroy documents, particularly in the world of the internet and emails, there are other people that were in possession of those emails. So it's difficult to cover your tracks.
Right. And what's important, I keep saying we have a new administration, but we still have those deep state bureaucrats. We still have people who are going to want to cover their tracks who are still working under the Trump administration.
It's one of the reasons why we need to get his nominees confirmed quickly. The sub-cabinet posts confirmed quickly. He's done this. He's put acting administrators in place right now. He did that very, very swiftly because President Trump, in his first term, came in as he wasn't a seasoned politician. He didn't have longstanding relationships in the swamp. So he had to rely on other people advising him in terms of who the personnel was. I think he came in far more trusting of the administration, that people would respect the fact that he won the election, that he was now president, he's commander-in-chief. The permanent bureaucracy, they don't. They just look at any president, and the attitude is, this too shall pass. They're far more likely to do the bidding of a radical leftist than they are a conservative like a Donald Trump.
Right. And maybe even want to go more radical than whoever the Democratic president is.
Right.
What do you think in terms of what your committee will be investigating? What do you think Americans will be able to find out about the deep state and the politicization there that maybe they didn't know beforehand?
Well, I think what has happened during COVID is it opened up a lot of people's eyes. It certainly did mine. I used to defend Big Pharma until the pandemic, and then I really did witness firsthand how Big Pharma has captured the agencies, and that's not a one-off. I have no problem with big business. I come from the private sector, but I have a problem when big business uses the power they've accumulated to try and quash competition, try and take over the agencies that are supposed to regulate them to their advantage, disadvantage of their competitors and to the American consumer and the American public. So I think we'll find that time and time again. Government represents power. It is power. And as Lord Acton aptly noted, power corrupts. And so government's corruptible. The problem is government. Because it will be corrupted. And these business people, they're smart. The first thing they try and do is, how can we survive in a period of overtaxation, overregulation? Well, they not only figure that out, they also figure out how to then capture the very agencies that are supposed to regulate them on behalf of the American public. And again, they turned against their competitors and the American public. So that needs to be exposed and uncovered, and it'll be uncovered, I think, in instance after instance with federal agency after federal agency.
Okay. And we did see elements of the Biden administration. He issued some orders on his way out. They've called it Trump-proof, the bureaucracy. What do you think are ways that the administration and also maybe Congress can do to undo that and ensure that?
The problem with the executive order is that the next president come in and issue an executive order to just cancel it. It's more difficult with regulations that have gone through the Administrative Procedures Act. So that takes more time. We do have a power capability by the Congressional Review Act, which we will be using. I think the number is close to 150 regulatory actions that occurred in the window that we're able to overturn in time. Probably 50 of those are pretty nasty that we are certainly going to target. Those are the numbers that have been given me. I haven't seen the detail yet, but that'll be one way we can roll back some of the harm done by the Biden administration is on its way out the door.
Okay. You've been a pretty long time watcher of the taxpayers' money, and did you anticipate your committee is going to be working with DOJ in terms of looking for waste, fraud, and abuse? Yeah,
that actually be a good part of the Homeland Security Governmental Affairs Committee. Okay, so that'd certainly be under our jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. I'm also on the Budget Committee and the Finance Committee, so I'll be heavily engaged in any kind of budget reconciliation process. One of the things I brought one of my charts, but this one shows how out of control federal government spending was after the pandemic. I use the analogy, if you're a family and you have a major medical problem and you have to borrow $50,000 to pay for medical bills, once your family member is well, you don't keep borrowing $50,000 and keep spending at that level. You stop borrowing, you return to a pre-illness level. Well, that's what the federal government should do. In 2019, we spent $4.4 trillion. During the pandemic, we shot up, spending spree $6.6 trillion. Last 5 years, we've averaged $6.5 trillion. Last year, we spent $6.9. There's no justification for that. It's grotesque. So we have to return to some type of pre-pandemic reasonable level of spending. I've proposed a couple options. We could go back, for example, to Bill Clinton's 1998 budget. That's where we actually had a surplus. And if you take that budget and increase it based on population growth and inflation, plus you exempt Social Security, Medicare, and interest, you spend at 2025 levels there, we'd take Clinton's $1.7 trillion worth of spending, inflate that up to 5.5. What's interesting about that number is that's the revenue projection of the Biden administration. That's how feasible a balanced budget is. But if that's too reasonable for you, take Clinton or take Obama in 2014. Do the same thing, increase based on population inflation, slot in today's Medicare, Social Security, and interest, we'd be at $6.2 trillion. Right now, the one that I think that Chairman of the Budget Committee, Lindsey Graham, is focusing on is President Trump's own budget for 2025. His last year of office, he projected in a 2021 budget what 2025 spending ought to be. We do the same thing where we use his spending plus today's Social Security, Medicare, and interest. That'd be about $6.1 trillion. So there's the range. We don't have to spend $7 trillion. It's very reasonable. Three different options of reasonableness: Clinton, Obama, or Trump. Slots of somewhere between $5.5 and $6 trillion. Now, you can take a look at those budgets. I'm presenting those to Lindsey Graham today. 200-some pages, 6,000 line items, all the detail of those budgets. Now, we need to look at that detail, adjust what we want to adjust, but there's no reason for us to be spending more than $6 trillion as a baseline budget for 2025. Now, we'll spend more than that because by the time we fund 2025, and nobody knows how we're going to do that yet, we're already halfway through the fiscal year. So 2025 is going to be a mess, and we're going to be spending it at high levels. But for 2026, if we're not down to something close to a $6 trillion baseline plus whatever inflation is for 2025 to 2026, shame on us. I will guarantee that nobody who voted for President Trump, or virtually no one who voted for President Trump, thought we would be spending at President Biden's grotesque spending levels. So I'm trying to put pressure on the process, on everybody involved. We have to get our spending down to, again, $4.4 trillion 5 years ago, somewhere in the $6 trillion range. It shouldn't be up to $7 trillion.
Okay. All right. Well, so I wanted to ask you actually about an issue in Wisconsin. We cover election integrity a lot at the Daily Signal, and there is an amendment, a constitutional amendment in April to enshrine voter ID in the Wisconsin state constitution. Do you expect that to pass?
Yes. Now, what we're going to do is that is an advisory referendum right there. So in order to have it be constitutionally binding, you have to pass it in two separate legislative sessions. But I think we'll get that one passed. I think handily, because I think we've had some other advisory referendums that passed like at 70%. So these issues that conservatives push are generally supported by large majorities of the American public.
Okay, yeah, and particularly voter ID has gotten high approval ratings. So.
I mean, nationally, I think it's like 85% approval. Again, people want election integrity. They don't want an illegitimate vote or a fraudulent vote canceling out their legitimate vote. I mean, it just makes common sense.
Okay. And I want to ask the ranking member on your subcommittee is Senator Blumenthal. Do you think there might be some bipartisan opportunities there with him? Or?
Well, I think we both probably agree. I don't want to speak for him, but he's had questions about the pharmaceutical industry in the past. Mm-hmm. I think he's asked questions about whether pharmaceutical companies should, advertise. We're one of, I think, only two nations that allows that. Mm-hmm. Now, we'd probably come at it from two different viewpoints. I think he would want to eliminate pharmaceutical advertising because he thinks it'll bring the cost of drugs down. I don't think it's that big an issue in terms of the price of drugs. I want to ban it because it allows them to control the narrative. And that was revealed during COVID. If you look at a pharmaceutical ad where they've got 30 seconds of all the horrible side effects, first of all, you would never spend money to run an ad warning consumers how your product might kill them. Okay, so it makes no sense. Nobody knows what those drugs are. You see some happy people throwing a frisbee to a dog, or running on the beach or grilling out. So the only reason they spend billions of dollars advertising on media is so they can capture the narrative. And we saw that they were able to do that very successfully during COVID. We can't allow that.
Okay, right. All right. I think that's everything I have. Is there anything you would want to add or any issues to cover?
Well, going back to our budget, one of the things I've recommended is, and I know President Trump and the House want one big, beautiful bill. That's going to be hard to achieve. It just is. I mean, practically speaking, let's face it, we when President Trump first won, repeal, replace Obamacare, everybody talked about it. We were completely unprepared for it, and nobody had a good plan, and that utterly failed. So from my standpoint, I'd like to do 3-step reconciliation. The first one, let's give President Trump the funds he needs to secure the border over 4 years. I mean, that's, in Republican circles, completely non-controversial. That ought to pass easily. When we do that, we must establish the budget based on current policy for revenue. That's exactly how we handle spending bills. If a spending program ends and they want to extend it in the budget, it doesn't score. They just assume it's going to be extended, so it scores nothing. If a tax provision that returns more of the money to the American public ends and you want to extend it, that's a big score. So that's ridiculous. So, we pass a budget based on current policy. That will allow us then in a second very quick reconciliation, just extend current policy, tax policy. That will take a massive tax increase that's going to occur automatically off the table, giving us time to thoughtfully work on hopefully simplifying and rationalizing the tax code. President Trump has a number of tax proposals. We do have expired provisions of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, generally having to do with the business depreciation, amortization, R&D, that type of thing. I'd like to throw all that stuff in the hopper with the mind toward how do we make our tax system a lot simpler, a lot more rational. It costs $400 billion plus to comply with our tax code. Let's eliminate that cost to our economy. So that will take time. We can't rush that process. In that final bill is then when we will use all the reconciliation as well to achieve a reasonable baseline budget for 2026 and beyond. So again, that's going to take a lot of work. It's going to be complex. Let's return certainty, no tax increase in 2026, and let's make sure that President Trump has the funds he needs to honor his promise to the American public about securing the border.
And do you think real spending cuts are achievable?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, it's and again, I'm not approaching it from a grotesquely unreasonable $7 trillion base. I'm saying, again, I don't think Bill Clinton spent too little.
Right.
Okay. I think that budget passed 85-15. So there are plenty of Republicans that voted for Bill Clinton's 1998 spending priorities. Again, I'm not suggesting $1.7 trillion of spending. I'm saying 5.5 because I'm inflating it for population growth and inflation, and using today's Social Security, Medicare, and interest expense. It's incredibly reasonable. Nobody can argue against that approach. They just can't. They can, pick and choose. Well, we're not spending enough here, or we're spending too much. Fine. We need to go through that detail, which is why I printed out more than 200 pages with 6,000 individual line item spending deals. Let's go through that with a fine-tooth comb.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Subscribe to get the news the legacy media won't tell you and only the Daily Signal can bring to you.